So remember, this is a Q&A type format program. It is not a traditional program where we have a PowerPoint and whatnot, no handout. What it is we're going to try and answer questions. So put your questions in the Q&A. We're going to talk about social history, and it's going to be lovely. So we are so glad you guys are able to join us. We did get a couple questions via email. So we are going to tackle those first, but perhaps it'll inspire other questions for you. But Elizabeth, do you want to go ahead and get started on what is social history? Let's start there.
Yeah. So social history, kind of the best, like kind of bare bones, non-technical definition of it is going to be the studying of history of ordinary people. People like our ancestors. So not the rich and the famous, unless you did have ancestors that are rich and famous. That's kind of nice for those who do. I am not one of them. So it's studying, what did their worlds look like? Did they live through a pandemic? What social movements were going on in that time frame? Were they alive when women got the right to the vote? Stuff like that. Labor movement. What does their world look like? What's happening around them? Because our ancestors didn't live in a vacuum by any means. But I think when we do genealogy research, we sometimes can get kind of bogged down with looking at our family's story from a very micro level, looking at the individual. But this kind of just broadens that a little bit. And it can also kind of help you figure out, maybe give you some clues for looking for other records. So like what resources were available, for example, for somebody who's destitute, living in New York City in the 1880s, what social welfare could they access? And that might actually lead you to find more records that just kind of adds more color to the story. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Another way to describe this is looking for the historical context. So you'll hear us sometimes say that. And Kurt Witcher, who you guys know, he has a phrase that I think is completely applicable and I absolutely love. Doing the history eliminates the mystery. So I think that really helps, because then you're able to answer more questions when you understand the history of where your ancestors were, where they were living, the community, maybe the religion, maybe it's the location, maybe it's the profession, maybe it's anything and everything. You can understand more about that ancestor. And I think that's really fun. I really like that.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. I mean, how I got, just kind of on a personal note for you guys, because, we're all about sharing here. I was kind of interested in my family story before I really got into genealogy. But the thing that actually got me into was when I was in grad school for history, and I started studying this one particular individual who no one really knew anything about. She lived a pretty ordinary life, except for the fact that she was really interested in all these social movements. And while trying to study her life and how, where she's from, what did it look like to be a woman who would have been born during the famine in Ireland, stuff like that, that is kind of what brought me to start getting into genealogy in a more serious level. So I kind of did things backwards, I think, for a lot of genealogists, got into the social history before getting into the genealogy. But it adds a lot of color, I think, to the story, because it is a story.
Yeah, and we had oh my goodness, 4 different classes of students, high schoolers and college students here this past week. And the thing that I consistently tell them is you begin with the bones. You begin with the bones of the names, the dates, the places, and then you add the meat. You add the stories, because your ancestors were living, breathing people. They lived through tragedy and triumph. They did amazing things. They did not so amazing things. And you get to discover what they are. And you get to put those stories behind those people. And so I think it's really fun to try and get people who are younger getting started to understand that they see these movies, they see these TV shows, they see maybe they're into reading and they read these books. Their family members, if they're historical, could fit into some of these, and they need to figure that out and see that. So it's kind of fun. But let's kind of start digging in a little bit. But we did pull a book that we thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I put a link to it in the chat, which I will again. Just give me one moment, and I actually have it sitting on my desk next to me. But we did come across this book that's specifically about incorporating social history and family history, and it is titled "Bringing Your Family History to Life Through Social History," and it is by Catherine Scott Sturdivant. Y'all probably can't see this very well.
You can see it.
Yeah.
It looks like the car, oh gosh, is it
Model T? Not a Model T, but not, it's too new to be a Model T, but it's like that type of thing.
I feel like it looks like, is it Life with Father, or it's one of those old movies where they have a whole bunch of kids, and that's what the cover looks like to me.
Yeah, someone in the chat is mentioning that it's expensive on Amazon. I did not know how expensive it is on Amazon. I just found this on our shelves.
Check your local libraries to see if they have a copy, because in our collection alone, we have 3 copies. There's 2 that can be checked out and 1 in the genealogy collection. So it is a book that has been picked up by libraries across the country. So a way that you can look is called WorldCat, and we can throw that in there. WorldCat.org, you can look up any book and see what local libraries might have it. So check that out.
Yeah, there's some people who are saying they're seeing it used on Amazon for less money. So yeah, if you don't want to buy it, definitely check Amazon, but it's probably, it might not be in print anymore. So dig around for it. But from what I've read of it, it's pretty good. I enjoy it.
I think it's a good one. Okay, so I think we have a couple questions that we can tackle, and we have some that are appearing in the Q&A, which is lovely. But we had a couple come in via email. So let's see here. Someone asked about, says, I have a family who had several generations of stonemasons in England. They immigrated in the 1870s and 80s to Ontario, Canada, in the Toronto area. I have a theory that they came for the masonry work, but how do I prove that? By 1910, they were moving to the Rochester, New York area. Some were located on the census as rollers for Kodak. By 1930, they moved again to Chicago to join other family. They were most likely going where the jobs were and following family through this. I find tracking them to be enjoyable, but wonder why they went where they did. So a lot of that involves still doing the tracing. So you mentioned that they were stonemasons. Well, there was a lot of masonry work in the Toronto area. And one of the things you might want to do is start looking at city directories. And also you might want to see what you can find, like maybe where they were during that time period. So they could have moved for work. They could have continued the family profession, and a lot of people did, but they also could have moved for a better place to live, maybe having land, maybe they moved because a family friend already moved. So you kind of have to explore a little bit where they ended up in Canada, in that Toronto area, and try to figure out what was going on there. Who were they living by? Who were they living with? Did the passenger list have any information for you? Was there other people on the passenger list that were also living in the same area as them in that Toronto area? And kind of taking those clues and trying to figure out what was going on. So let me pull up the Ancestry. Okay, and share screen again. So one of the things, okay, here we go. So this is Ancestry Institution. It's basically the World Edition. So keep that in mind. We can begin searching and you can actually pick a location. So you can say, I want North America, I want Canada, and then see more about Canada. I like to see what records are available when I'm looking and I'm not exactly sure, and see, okay, is this something I could find? Canada, city, and area directories. Cool, that looks like it might help. And once you click on that, you can then narrow down. So I'm not sure exactly where it is other than Toronto area, and don't have an exact year, so let's go with that. And then you can open it up and start exploring. And my mouse isn't working properly. There it is. So you can just kind of skip ahead and just kind of look around, see if they're in the city directory, see what sort of businesses are around. Typically the businesses are towards the end. You can skip ahead and start looking and seeing if that is a possibility. Move this, 277, okay. Let's do 260. All right, so now we have some different occupations. So then you can start seeing, okay, are they doing the same occupation? Perhaps, are there businesses in the area? Is this a possibility? Did you have anything to add to that, Elizabeth?
Actually, no, but it's a good segue to the next question, because you mentioned that, city directories are a great resource to kind of adding to that story, figuring out as far as like occupation goes, like, are there a ton of Masons living there? Another really important resource, I think, for figuring out what was life like for our ancestors is newspapers, which is a segue to kind of the next question we had. It's kind of long, so I'm going to summarize. The person who emailed us said that they had ancestors that moved to what would become Wilkinson, Mississippi, a few years before 1800, and they turn up on the census for that area in 1800, 1803, and 1805. So local census are turning up, but then they disappeared. The wife remarried, but like the rest of the family kind of disappears. So they're wondering, how do you find out if there's something like a disease, like an epidemic, that could have resulted in the deaths of like multiple people in a family? So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you kind of a basic way of just kind of figuring out, was there like a cholera epidemic going on in the area? So let's see. Okay, I assume you guys can see the correct screen. So say we're looking for cholera, for example, and this is newspaperscom. I'm just searching kind of broadly here. I'm searching kind of in this, I'm going to do a 20-year date range. Yeah, so there's 71 matches for cholera coming up in the newspaper. This is specifically in Natchez. So that's kind of one way of doing that. In this instance, for this newspaper, is talking about this is like an ad for, this looks like an ad for some type of like healing water situation. Yeah, so you'll see a lot of interesting ads like this in the newspaper in the 19th century, where it's like, you know, here's these like cure-alls for all these diseases. Oftentimes, some of that might have cocaine in it, which is interesting. But that can kind of add a certain amount of understanding of what did medicine look like, access to medical care for somebody who might not have a lot of money. And even if you did, if you could hire a doctor, what does that care actually look like? Especially for women. I love, this is strange, I love researching midwifery in the 19th century. It's, I see Allison laughing. It's true. I find it interesting because it's like, I think a lot of people forget how modern giving birth in a hospital actually is. And even when it was starting to be done, a lot of women didn't want to do it because you were more likely to die because your doctors, they weren't washing their hands or their instruments. Think about that. And a midwife,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, before you go off this page, I just saw your mouse move. I don't know if you noticed this, but it says John Scott, agent for his mother. This was his mother's business.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I have questions about that. I want to go into that more. If this was my research project, this is what I would look into more as well. Isn't that interesting? I saw that and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And yes, I just saw on the chat, someone gave Fulton History Newspapers as a great source. If you're looking for free newspapers, Elefind is great. The Ancestor Hunt is great. Chronicling America, lots of great information. So there's a ton of information that you can find free online. You don't have to have newspapers.com or newspaper archive or any of these databases.
Yeah, I just pulled it up because it's something that we have as one of our on-site databases. So I'm like, I'll just search this one. But yeah, there are other newspaper sources. And someone was asking if we could put those. Yeah, you're doing it.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, so if you live in Indiana, Inspire provides newspapers.com for free. If you don't know what Inspire is, just Google Inspire databases. It's a free service for people who live in Indiana. Your state may have something similar. It is individualistic. So make sure to check and see if that's something that is offered by your state. But in Indiana, you have free access to newspapers.com through Inspire. Yep, see, Michigan, Library of Michigan has access. Yep, Chronicling America from the Library of Congress. There's lots of really cool newspaper databases. And you have to remember, like, universities sometimes are the ones that are digitizing newspapers. So sometimes it's the university archives websites or whatnot. So play around, Google, see what you can find. You never know where those newspapers, where those sources are going to be.
Google is your friend. And Google is especially your friend doing this type of stuff. If you suspect, like, I came across in a newspaper article about my great-grandmother that she, only 2 months after giving birth to twins, she was going from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where she lived, and she was traveling to Birmingham, Alabama, to an open-air camp to receive treatment. That's going to be TV, but they listed, like, the name of a mountain as, like, part of this, like, where she was going. So I started searching, and it's now part of a state park, and apparently there was, like, a TB, later on a TB hospital, when she was there, it was tense. It was just tense in a field, which, needless to say, she didn't survive TB. She died only 3 months later. But yeah, Google's your friend.
Yes. So I'm looking at the Q&A, and there's somebody in here who's asking about how to get started with looking up grandparents and their history. So honestly, with that person, if you don't have living relatives to ask and you're just trying to get started, I'm going to tell you to email us. Please send us a question and ask us how to get started and give us the names so we can help you. So we can give you some tips on maybe the sources that would be best for your particular family and the research you're doing, and to kind of help you make sure that you are tracing that right family from the beginning. So we want to make sure you get those bones correct before you add that meat. So let us help you. Our email address is genealogy@acpl.info. Are you typing that?
Yep.
Okay. So please, please, please shoot us an email. We want to help you.
Which kind of brings me to the next question in the Q&A about Quakers. This person said, I just discovered that both my maternal and paternal sides of my family were Quakers. Just found out where they crossed paths in Park County, Indiana in the 1790s. I've not been able to figure out how they both ended up in a Quaker town in Iowa, as I do not know my paternal side was also Quaker. So Quaker records are my favorite. If you start looking into like the women's like meeting minutes, oftentimes if they're traveling west, especially in that time frame, they're doing mission work. And that's going to be talked about, especially in the women's meeting minutes, because the women's meeting minutes are going to be, it'll talk about births and marriages and deaths and all that good stuff, but they'll also talk about things like education, that type of thing. Scandals are also big in the meeting minutes. They're mentioned in the men's minutes, but they're mentioned more in detail in the women's minutes. So definitely like dig into maybe what meeting house they would have been involved in, see if those records survive. They might have survived. And just start looking through those records. They're so much fun. They're my favorite. And the person who asked in the chat if I read A Midwife's Tale, yes, I have read that book. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, so the next one is about a wheelwright whose family basically left to go different places in America and Australia. And the one thing that you said is that there's a family history written in 1940 by the daughter who said that trade was very bad in England. So why would they want to leave? Well, that's part of what you want to look at. That's looking at the history of where they came from in England. So he stayed in England. He still had a trade. He still was able to make money. But perhaps there wasn't enough trade for his sons if they were also wheelwrights. Like, what if there was not enough work for all of them to make enough money? And that's why they moved. So you want to look at the history from that time period, and then also like how many people were doing certain jobs. So I think that's probably going to be the best way for you to understand more about this, but truly looking at the history of the town in England is really going to help you and help you understand what was going on during that time period.
Yes, I concur. I'm reading the question again. Yeah, I agree. So the question about, okay, are there any sources that list stories of immigrants and their experiences traveling by ships in the early 1900s? Yes, those do exist. Um, I So I used to work, for those of you who don't know, I used to be an educator at the Lower East Side Tenement Museum, which is an immigration museum that tells the stories of immigrant families that lived in this one particular tenement in Lower Manhattan. And I am kicking myself because I am blanking on some of the names of those like firsthand accounts. Um, I probably will remember as soon as this webinar is over. Um, but they do exist. So I would honestly just kind of start with a Google search, because those shipwrights were described. Oh wait, someone. Yes, 97 Orchard, an edible history. Yes, that one is good. Yes, the building still exists. It is a good time. We did a program. They did a program for us not long ago, and it is the recording. I think is on our YouTube channel. So the curator of the Ten Museum, Dave Fabularo, he did a program for us several months ago, May, April, something like that. But it's on our YouTube channel.
It is. I just double checked. It's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely check that out because he does mention what some of those first-hand accounts are, because the ship ride, especially the steerage voyage, would have been miserable. Miserable. Yeah. Good times.
Okay. Um, yeah, I've read several firsthand accounts as well, so I know that they're out there. It's about looking at for the diaries and whatnot. And just remember, guys, you may not find the journal, the diary, the firsthand account for your ancestor, but if you can find someone who had a similar experience or came from a similar location and went to a similar location, you were still able to get clues. You're still able to start to piece together that story. Because it is going to be similar.
I think the Ellis Island like museum website has stuff of that nature that you guys would be interested in.
That's always my suggestion for military too, is if you're trying to piece together someone's military experience, they probably didn't leave a journal or a diary or a firsthand account. Most didn't, but you may be able to find one of a similar regiment or a similar experience that can at least piece together kind of what could have happened.
Yeah, someone mentioned in the chat, the WPA Federal Writers Project. All of that stuff is on Library of Congress's website, and that does have some of those firsthand accounts.
So I'm looking at the next question. We've been trying to find a female family member who was born in 1855. You have her on the census, but cannot locate anything after that. We assume she got married and had a different name on the next census. I've tried many, many avenues. Any tips on how to proceed? Go local.
Yeah.
Go local. And I'm not even just talking about start looking like on the census local or whatever. Talk to the local librarians. They might be able to help you. Look and see what you can find for that area. If it is a major city, you still need to talk to the local librarian. Hopefully it's rural. I don't know. It might help. If it is a smaller location, you could search the census on Ancestry or even Family Search by the first name. You just have to exact it and choose a particular census to go. and look at and see if you can find possibilities of who she might have married, and then maybe trace from there. And also keep your mind open for the possibility that she could have also passed away. You never know. I mean, yeah, after the age of 10, very well could have ended up getting married sometime after that, but she also could have passed away. I mean, the mortality rate was pretty high back then.
Yeah, I would, in that kind of vein, I would also try newspapers. Just it's like kind of a Hail Mary, but you know, we're
Yeah.
all about that. You know, when in doubt, just try something. I've personally had to look before, like page by page in the census for this one county in Alabama, trying to figure out where this person's like parents were, where this person was. We've all done it, but that's a part of the chase. It's exhausting,
fun.
but we love it.
Yeah, it's putting together those pieces to this puzzle. And hey, we're gonna be going page by page looking at a census here in April, so I mean,
excited.
I know, me too. So might as well get some practice in. But yeah, I would start searching by the first name, which sounds crazy, but I think you can do it. I mean, women are definitely harder to find, but it is possible. And those local records, you would be amazed at what local librarians and historians can help you with. And they will know of things that are not publicly known. Something that could be incredibly local that you never know. It's just in their library.
Okay, so next question. Do you have what resources would we recommend to help sort out like early to mid 1800s ancestors in the UK? That depends on where in UK and what you define the UK, because some people include the Republic of Ireland in that. So if you mean just British Isles in general, we got to narrow it a little bit, because Ireland is a hot mess express. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's a hot mess. That we could do a whole other program on, and I probably should. So it kind of depends, but Find My Past is a good resource for British Isles, like records. Family Search always. But as far as like doing the social history stuff, there's a lot of good publications out there for that time frame. Phyllis Sherwin, I promise I will do a program on Irish research for you. Just for you.
Okay, so also with, I'm just thinking of UK, adding that social history, sorting out the ancestors. I feel like Family Search, the wiki would be incredibly helpful as well. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, I'm going to pull that up really quick. Hold on. Let me get it on my screen first. All right, y'all can see Family Search, I'm hoping.
Yep.
You go to search and then research wiki. Search, research wiki. It brings up a lovely map, and you can click on this map as much as you want, or you can type in a location. I'm just going to type in England. You can type in a location, and it's going to bring up genealogy, and it's going to start with the general information. It's going to give you some history. It's going to give you locations. It's going to tell you what you might be able to find. And then you can also go over here to record types and say, okay, well, I specifically want to know what I can find in church records. You go there and it kind of starts telling you a little of background and what types of records you might be able to find. And a lot of times you're going to find history as well. It's going to give you some background of, okay, this is what you can find. And they tell you if it's on a paid website. They give you a $sign to tell you that, which I find incredibly helpful personally. And so you can go through and say, okay, this is stuff that'll help, this is stuff that won't help, etc. So make sure to check that out. I don't think enough people are using the Family Search Wiki. I'm always surprised when people walk in and they're unfamiliar with it. Sorry, I need to lean over. I have 3 screens, guys. I couldn't see where the arrow was.
Like a supervillain.
Just a little bit. I like to have everything up and going at the same time. This is how I've been running these programs for months. A year? I don't know, however long this has been going on. So check this out. There's a lot of great information, and I just put in England for fun. I can go to United Kingdom. We can be less specific. You can take a look at this and go, okay, or you can go to the British Isles. We can be less specific. And you can be more specific. So again, Family Search is where it's at.
Okay. Do you have any good sources to find a New York marriage from the 1820s? I have not found any newspaper transcription sources. Well, if they were Catholic, the New York Archdiocese, well, if we're talking about New York City, if it's New York City, the New York City Archdiocese records are all on Family Search. Find My Past, excuse me. Other than that, you're going to want to look for church records of some sort. But go to the research wiki, because it'll say what's available as far as like marriage records for that county. If it's not New York City, where you can look. Yeah, when in doubt, use the research wiki.
I would also use the catalog on Family Search.
Yeah.
Again, I'm gonna share screen really quick, just because, again, I feel like this is an underutilized portion of Family Search.
Oh, my favorite example from doing that is searching just poorhouse and estate in the keywords, like not place. Yeah,
you can do keywords over here.
Yeah.
I'm doing a place right here. Just New York and marriages. Well, newspaper vital records. Okay, so vital records, there's 64. I have no idea what all of these are, but there's different records that have already been put online.
Just as a quick reminder for everybody, while we are trying to look at the Q&A and the chat, put your questions for us in the Q&A. If you definitely want your question answered, put it in the Q&A. Just as a quick reminder.
And also, the reason the catalog is incredibly helpful, I don't know if you saw, but Family Search reached their goal of digitizing their microtext collection, which is absolutely fantastic. But they cannot index it at the rate that they have been digitizing. So a lot of the material is in the catalog. It is not going to be discoverable through searching their records. You have to go into the catalog to find it. So make sure to check that out. And the next thing is just kind of cool. And I hope that you've been looking at newspapers. David, I will say your name. His grandparents were scheduled for an excursion to Michigan City, Indiana from Chicago on the SS Eastland. When they got to the ship, their grandfather was asked to return home to get his mandolin. And when they returned, the Eastland capsized. My family has the mandolin.
That's cool.
I hope you've written that up and like put it in some periodicals or like a family history or something.
Or a blog.
Please. Anything to get that information out. But that's amazing.
So he disappears in 1880. So he disappears between 1870 and 1880. Okay. Allison, why don't you read the question and I'll.
Okay. I have a great grandfather who may or may not have been in the Civil War in the 1860s in Georgia, near Tennessee, in northwest Georgia. He shows up in Illinois in the 1865 census and there on the 1870 census. He then disappears in 1880. The whole family disappears after that, except for my grandmother, who is now dead as of 1937. All the family I know of are dead. I've not been able to prove that he was or was not in the army, and if so, on what side. I'm stuck on him where to go. Someone in the chat had actually mentioned the National Park Service, which is amazing. The Soldiers and Sailors database.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen that. Let me pull that up. Honestly, I just Google National Park and Civil War and it usually comes up. Yep, there we go. Let me share. So if you're not familiar, this is it. It's National Park Service, the Civil War. If you go to people and the Soldiers and Sailors database, you can then search. You can search for soldiers, sailors, the regiments, cemeteries, battles, prisoners, monuments, medals of honor. So this is a pretty incredible database. The information on the soldiers is not a lot. So if you're getting in here thinking that you're going to find like an entire like history of what they did, this is what you're going to get. And just so nobody questions this right here, this information, the M539 Rule 32, is the source for this piece of information. It is not going to lead you to anything else. This is literally just the citation of the collection it comes from. I've had questions about that. I just wanted to clarify that really quick. But this is the information you'll get, but you do get the battle unit name, and so then you can find out more history that way.
So the other kind of piece to that question about how the whole family just kind of disappears between 1870 and 1880, except for one person. One thing to kind of look into when you have instances like that, look into economic disasters happening, because the Great Panic is happening in that time frame. So the whole family could have picked up and moved because of money issues. So that's when looking at what's going on in the world around them is really important, which is kind of why we're all here tonight. So like for kind of an example of that, one of the families that we used to talk about at the Tenement Museum, the Gumpert's family, the family they're all together in 1870, but then by 1880, the dad has disappeared. Also, another child has disappeared. That child passed away as an infant. The husband, it became a whole complicated thing where the wife basically had him declared dead like many years after the fact. She claims she never knew what happened to him. Then he went out looking for work one day and he never came back and she assumed he was dead. Turns out he just left. He ran off to Cincinnati, never remarried, never had more kids, and he passed away when he was quite elderly. And we like to say to people, what could be some of the driving causes behind that? We don't know what was going on in their marriage. We don't know what it would have been like for somebody who's being told by society, it is your fault that you're poor. It is your fault that your kids are starving. And you cannot find work. That does something to people psychologically. So there are a lot of cases of things like abandonment during economic downturn, like the Great Depression or the Great Panic. So definitely look into those kind of bigger things happening. Like, what does the economy look like? Even not just like the country's economy or the global economy, just economy of the place that they're living. That can kind of help you maybe fill in some gaps. Maybe not tell you exactly what happened, but it can give you some ideas.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry,
I'm
I
just-
went on a tangent.
You are fine. So someone's asking about photographs. So mid to late 1800s, central Indiana, Illinois, Wabash Valley farm life. Oh my gosh, there's so many sources. Like I can't even begin. I love images. I think they're so cool to just add a little bit more of that context and just to see and understand a little bit more. So Illinois has a great digital archive. Let me share my screen again. I'm very much a person that likes to give visuals. Maybe that's why I like photographs so much. But Illinois has digital archives that you can take a look at, and there's information in here where you can find images. I would also recommend looking at the universities. Universities almost always have a digital collection as well. The Indiana Historical Society has a fantastic digital collection. You can, yes, I'm sure. All right, so they use Content DM, which is what we use as well. So you can do some searches in there and see what you can find. The Indiana State Library also has some information. If you could go to Indiana Memory, there's so many different things that you can look at for photographs. So honestly, most of these, since they're online and they are digital assets, if you start doing Google searches, and go to the image section, and I don't know if you guys know how to do that. And forgive me if this is too simplistic, but I want to just make sure. I love the suggested things that come up. We're just going to put in 1880s and do images. Cool, what's this? I don't know what this is. It's from a blog.
Harvest of friendship.
Well, this looks like something fun to learn about, but you can do all sorts of different searches and find information this way. I'll go back to this. And you can change the dates as well. But I'm always interested in how these images get online and how they're cataloged. And you can put in exact dates and see if it changes. Oh, it does. Hoosiers in the American Story, Chapter 5. I'll take that. Okay, so this actually goes through a history lesson. So that's more information that you can take and find some images. And it would also tell you, oh, the Oliver Plow. I've heard of that. That's out of South Bend. There's a mansion that's now a museum that was owned by the Oliver family. I think it's called Kalpsha Home. So look for specific collections, but don't forget to Google. I will say that so many times when you're doing any sort of research, Google. People put the most inane things online. You might find what you're looking for. Oh, your grandfather worked. That's awesome.
Oh, that is cool.
Okay. Answered that one.
Ooh, convict records.
Have fun with that.
Is there a repository for mugshots somewhere? I've not been able to dial into that.
In Indiana, it's the state archive.
In Georgia, I don't know. Want to know what I'm doing right now, guys? I'm Googling.
And guys, that's part of being a researcher is and that's actually something I learned very early in my college career is sometimes it's not what you know, it's that you know how to find it. There's a difference. So it's not about memorizing the dates and places and all these facts and having that. It's having the tools to find things as quickly as possible. So I think that's just kind of fun.
You might be able to find it on the county level, unless they're in the state penitentiary. You might have to research it a little bit more to figure out.
Well, and if it's a local, like it says convict. I don't know. Is that a local prison? Is it state run?
There's a Ancestry Georgia U.S. Central Register of Convicts. Let me share my screen. I'll make things a little easier. Okay. Yeah, this is on Ancestry.
Oh, and that's probably where it's coming from.
Yeah.
What's the source at the bottom? Georgia State Archives. I bet they have the mugshots.
Yeah. Yeah, so looking at the source information on things like this for Ancestry usually will bring you down kind of a wider rabbit hole, and you might end up finding more.
Yeah, always make sure you look at the source, and sometimes it's in the about section and not just the source information. So make sure to always read the bottom of the pages that you're finding on Ancestry or whatever pages you're looking at, because wherever they got the information might be where the rest of it would be.
Yep. Okay. So we are running low on time. So if we do not get to your question, feel free to send us an email. We are always happy to answer questions and help. That's what we're here for. I'm going to put our email in the chat, but it's genealogy@acpl.info.
And we like helping.
We do like helping. That's our job. Fun. It's fun. We like what we do. One person, back to the Irish thing earlier, one person had put actually in the Q&A that they attended a webinar this morning on English, Scotland, and Ireland research, and they put links to all kinds of resources. I
think that was in the chat too.
Do you think that?
Yeah, that was in the chat as well.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in the chat again, just in case.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, these are all really great resources.
Someone has a great recommendation. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen while you're doing that. They're also stating that the books is a good part of Family Search. So let me tell you guys a fun fact. When I get on Family Search, I do not search records. I am either in the catalog, books, or research wiki. That's about it. Those are the parts that I find the most useful. I think it's an incredible resource. I am on Family Search every single day. There's so much in here, but the books, these are books that are digitized from all over, including the Allen County Public Library Genealogy Center. There is a scanning station in our basement where they are actively scanning books in our collection that are out of copyright. So make sure that you're checking that. You can see that there's over 32,000 books from our collection alone that have been digitized by Family Search and put on their website. So make sure you're checking the entire collection of all of the repositories, but just note that that is in there, and you can research using these books that maybe you wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So check that out and make sure you know, let me go back. If you do a search, you can search inside the books. It'll search everything. So if you put in a name, it's possibly going to search inside the book and the titles. So do some creative searching. You can find some really amazing pieces of history in there. So Ancestry and Family Search are both amazing collections.
I use them both. Like, I hop back and forth.
You use them together.
Yeah.
So this is how I explain it to the kids, to the students that come in. Ancestry is the easiest place to get started. It's like searching Google. It's going to take like the foam off the top of a coffee. That's what's happening with Ancestry. They are able to level up the results a lot quicker. They have a great algorithm. That's what they're putting their money into. So it's incredibly easy to use, and you get more satisfying results quicker. So that's the hook. That's the thing that usually hooks people into genealogy, is using Ancestry. You start using Family Search typically when you either don't want to pay for Ancestry because it is a paid site, although most local libraries do have subscriptions, or you're not finding what you're looking for on Ancestry because Ancestry doesn't have everything. Family Search doesn't have everything as well, but there's a lot more. And there's a lot of really unique collections. But you have to look in the catalog, the books, and the research wiki. You can't just search the records.
So how could the next question I'm kind of seeing in here, which this might have to be our last one. But again, if we don't get to your questions, just send us an email. And if you would like a copy of the chat, which a couple of people have been asking about, send us an email, do all the good things. So it's genealogy@acpl.info, which I just put in the chat. So last question, how can I find out why my relatives moved to Kansas in about 1880? Was there a land giveaway? Possibly. You could start by searching like land grants, Kansas, 1880. You could try searching for things like migration to Kansas, 1880s. It all kind of, as Allison said, it all kind of starts with just a basic generic Google search. You'll end up having to read probably some articles on just like why did people settle in Kansas? But that gives you an idea of maybe why did they do this. It might have to do with where they're leaving from. Oftentimes, if you're going to have ethnic communities who will follow each other, so it might have something to do with that. One person mentioned in the chat the Homestead Act. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say the Homestead Act, it said that by 1900, there was around 80 million acres of public land distributed.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, just like to find things like that out, just kind of start with a Google search. Because I'm going to tell you something, even though I have a degree in history, have a master's in history, I don't know every single historical thing that's ever happened in the world. And even the things that I have studied intensely, sometimes I might not like on the fly immediately remember. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on how much coffee I've had that day. Let's be real. So Google's your friend. It sounds dumb, but it's a place to start.
It is. I happen to know that the Kansas Historical Society has something called like Kansapedia. It's like their Wikipedia. I put a link in the chat to it. I knew that they had some stuff on the Homestead Act, so I threw that in there. A lot of states have these like really nice put together encyclopedias or Wikipedia pages for their specific state or location. You might want to play around and see what you can find. I know, so Indiana doesn't really have one, but Indianapolis has an encyclopedia. So some of the information could be helpful to the rest of the state. So look around and see what might be applicable to the state that you're researching or that you live in. You know, you can always find some crazy, crazy stuff. Ooh, someone just said that they Googled an ancestor's name and found a blog post. I'm telling you, Google, 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 and put things in quotations and play around with the names and the spellings
Yeah,
and the locations.
that's fun. That's really cool. Okay, so we are about out of time, friends. So thank you all again for joining us for this kind of casual fireside chat. And like I said earlier, if we didn't get to your questions, feel free to send us an email. If you want a copy of the chat that has like links to all kinds of fun stuff, send us an email, or just say hi. We like
Yes,
hearing from you.
we do. And we have a lot of fun when you guys actually come up to us or let us know that, hey, you've been attending our programs. It's actually really kind of nice. It's nice to put faces to names, or it's nice to hear from you guys other than in these programs. So we really do appreciate you and love that you guys keep coming to our programs and joining us. So thank you very much for joining.
Well, have a good night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.